It's time to ask the big question. What even are those floppy things on Rayman's head? Is it hair? Is it just the way his head is shaped? It looks kinda weird, but if it's just cosmetic, then I guess it isn't too bad. Oh god, look at that, he spins it around really fast to hover in the air and it's freaky and I don't want to look at it anymore and you can't make me. So Rayman will just have to save his friends and the world without hovering then. I'm glad we all agree. But can it be done? What do you think? Can we beat Rayman 2 Revolution without hovering? Let's find out. As always, let's go through the rules. But first, I just wanted to say that this video took a ridiculously long time to make. So if maybe you could hit that subscribe button, or maybe even follow us on Twitch, I'd love you forever. Okay, rule number 1, we must avoid using Rayman's hover ability at all costs. This excludes any forced flying sections of the game though, since they're unavoidable. Rule number 2, we must play every level in the game. There are various ways of skipping certain levels with glitches or by getting out of bounds, but we won't be skipping any level. Rule number 3, any glitches within the level themselves are fine, just as long as we're not skipping entire levels. And finally, rule number 4, as soon as we beat Razorbeard, we win! At the very least, we will be attempting the absolute minimum number of hovers. Have a guess in the comments section now before watching the video to see what you think the minimum number of hovers is, and then we'll see how close you are at the end. We start off by busting out of jail and crashing down to our home planet. Way to stick with the no hovering there, Rayman, no pain, no gain. The game then wastes its time by teaching us to hover, but thankfully Rayman can't read, and he clears the gap regardless. The teensies have their argument and they send us on their way to the fairy glade. Here we get a bit of platforming, but it's nothing we can't handle with normal jumps. We proceed until we break into the pirate base and make our way through the sewers. These jumps are still easy enough. We climb up the cobwebs until... we climb the cobwebs until we see our fairy friend Lee. From here we press on and take the plunge down a very big drop. Then that fool Murphy decides to ruin our day and tell us we have to use hover to ride these tornadoes to the top. It was at this early stage of the run that I started to realise what we had got ourselves into. Well, it's time to bring on the glitches, but first of all I want to thank this guy right here, Robin, a member of the Rayman Speedrunning Discord server. You see, I didn't know a single thing about the actual mechanics of Rayman 2 Revolution that all the speedrunners all make use of, and Robin really helped to educate me on what was possible in this game by abusing some cheeky bugs. The biggest bug is known as Grab Location Manipulation Warp, or GLM Warp for short. To put it as simple as I can, this game remembers the last place we hung on a ledge by using an invisible blue marker. And then after you've let go, you can jump and land next to a grabbable ledge in order to trick the game into thinking that the last place we hung was actually a little bit higher than it was. We can tell this is the case as the blue marker will move upwards and to the side slightly with each jump. This height will continue to increase with every jump as long as we land in the right spot. And the direction that Rayman is facing as he lands can also influence the direction the blue marker moves. And as soon as the blue marker comes into contact with certain parts of the level geometry, Rayman is instantly warped to that location, and back in his hanging state. If you want a more in-depth explanation of how this works, then I highly recommend the video that helped me learn the GLM warp, made by the aforementioned Robin. It will be linked in the description. If you ever seemingly randomly warped to a hanging position in this game, well then now you have an idea of why it happened. Of course, the plan is to use this to warp our way to the very top of this section to skip these tornadoes, but that was easier said than done. First of all, you can't make the blue marker go downwards again without grabbing on a ledge to reset its position. So if we miss a platform at the top, that means starting again. It took a long time of trial and error, but I started to see some results, as we were warped to a random part of the wall halfway up. This even had a chance of dropping us out of bounds and to our death. After many hours of practicing the correct GLM position, we suddenly experience a very odd side effect that I can't quite explain. After being warped into the wall for the 100th time, we drop down to try again, only for the tornado to send us flying in the air. I think that stayed high. What the... What? I wasn't about to complain, so I picked my jaw off the floor, quickly used this to my advantage, and launched myself to the very top. Oh my god. Okay, it's throwing me in the air without my helicopter. Now, all of a sudden. Oh my god! I've been practicing for hours to try and get the trick to work, where you can teleport up here. And then next thing I know, the whirlwinds carry me without the need of my helicopter. I had no idea that was going to work, or could even work. This is why you don't give up. Never give up. I'm sure this had to be related to all of the GLM nonsense we've been doing, but who knows how to replicate this consistently? If they do, please let me know. The Marshes of Awakening is easy, as it's all based on water skiing to the end. But after that we enter the bayou. Now we're back to some proper platforming. And there's only one gap in our way. We're supposed to drop this bridge down and hover down to it quickly before the ship hits us with its cannons. However, we don't want to hover down there, of course. And there's no way a regular jump will make it. Thankfully, there's another trick in this game, and it's a speedrunner's best friend: diagonal movement. If Rayman is moving in a diagonal direction, whether that be running, hovering, swimming, or even falling, then he will move noticeably faster than usual. Although this often means fighting the camera in order to direct Rayman in the way we want him to go. The big problem is, in some areas, this game locks the camera to a specific position. Regardless, it is possible to make this jump with enough diagonal momentum and a big jump from the very edge of the bridge. It took a fair few tries though. Thankfully, the rest of the bayou's platforming can be done with regular jumps. Even this seemingly large gap here can be cleared easily. Now we're off to the Lost Island, and this level is mostly swimming and sphere puzzles, all of which can be done with no hovers. This level's end sees us swinging towards a boss to drop a huge icicle on its head, and this too can be done just fine with no hovering. That's our first mask of 4, with 0 hovers so far. Moving on to the Menier Hills next, and it's hardly worth mentioning this level as it's all missile riding until we find our friend Clark, who's in a bad way. He needs an elixir of life, so we need to head to the Cave of Bad Dreams. The beginning is actually quite challenging, as you have to use these floating skulls that sink if you're not quick, and you can't always see where they are since you're higher up and hanging on the climbable walls. However, you can still get through it until you see this pillar. The idea here is that you hover to the pillar and then climb up to the top before it sinks. The problem is, we can't get anywhere near close enough to it with a regular jump. Even using diagonal movement doesn't quite give us the momentum we need for this one. We tried to use the GLM warp by hanging over the edge of the bridge, and then using the only part of the level geometry, the rib cage at the beginning, to move the GLM position through the walls and besides the pillar, but even that wasn't working. And the purple lum that we can see beyond the pillar, we can't reach that either, not even with a big jump towards it first. This is where Robin comes back in. Together we came up with a plan, and after a bit of testing we realised that it required a certain power up first, the rebound. Okay, I'll explain. There's another trick in this game. It's to do with the purple lums. If you swing from a purple lum, after landing, as long as you don't point the camera back towards the purple lum we just used, we can swing from it again, regardless of how far away Rayman is from the purple lum. As long as Rayman is facing it and there's a direct line of sight to the purple lum, we'll always connect to it again. We can use this to our advantage. If we get to this bridge, face to the right, but keep the purple lum out of camera shot, fire at the wall so that we rebound towards the purple lum, but before it hits we have to jump forward as far as we can, and then rotate 180 degrees in mid-air, right as our shot connects with the purple lum. This will cause Rayman to swing, but he'll bump straight into the bridge that we were just standing on. This can cause Rayman to rebound and be propelled in the opposite direction, and even then we had to hold diagonal direction in mid-air in order to have enough forward momentum just to grab the very bottom of the pillar. So many things could go wrong with this sequence, like missing the purple lum on the rebound, or not turning in mid-air at the right time, or not hitting the bridge by swinging under it, or not quite building enough momentum on the rebound with the diagonal movement, or maybe just straight up missing the pillar altogether. But finally, the stars aligned and we can finally move on from this spot. I was practicing that section for days. If Thankfully the rest of this section has these small platforms sticking out the walls we can use, and from there we can use diagonal movement to make the rest of the jumps. Just about. The sphere puzzle sections were fairly challenging, but it was all entirely possible without hovering, and even this big jump at the end was possible. This brings us to the boss fight itself, and it's actually largely based around platforming this time. Using the skulls to get across the gaps is easy since you can stop them whenever you need to, but the next part is a bit trickier. You can't quite make it to the pillar from this swing, but you can make it to the ledge that sticks out the nearby wall. It takes a fairly precise diagonal jump from here to grab onto the pillar, but it can be done. Some more skull hopping later and we beat the boss. We take the elixir of life back to the Menier Hills, heal Clark so we can open up the rest of the level for us. Another missile ride later and we finish the level. And the next level puts us straight into a boss fight against a giant spider, which also makes us the worst level in the game by default. After we put that spider down, we had ourselves a very large gap to clear. There's some webbing to grab onto, but we just couldn't quite grab it with our best diagonal jumps. There was limited space in this cave to really maneuver the camera around, but after many tries we were finally able to make this jump. From there we can rescue Glowbox easily, as there's no real platforming sections in the rest of the level. We can now enter the next hub area and break into the pirate stronghold to access Whale Bay. The only challenge in this level is this super awkward diagonal jump with the super awkward camera, but it's still very possible. The rest of the level is mostly swimming before rescuing the Teensy. Next, with a little help from Glowbox, we can enter the Sanctuary of Stone and Fire. And here it is. The very start of the level is a large lava-filled chasm, and the game fully intends you to hover down to the bridge below. I knew I was going to have to come up with something for this area. I just wasn't sure what yet. We start off by seeing just how far we can make it with our biggest diagonal jumps, and it's nowhere close. I also remembered that there was a giant plum that you can ride over the lava, but the plum was in the little alcove. I thought maybe we could fire into the opening as we die to see if we can hit the plum to knock it loose, but the plum is too far away, and plus the plums despawn when Rayman dies anyway, so that plan's no good. Then I tried to get us either on these trees or wedged between the branches and the wall. I'm not really sure what I was trying to do or if this would help, but I wanted to just try anything at this point. But this also didn't work. I did find a part of the floor that we can fall straight through and into the abyss. This doesn't help us at all, but it's interesting. The final resort was to attempt GLM warp, and we were making attempts at this for far longer than I care to admit. We tried hanging in either this edge or even at the base of the tree, which you can hang from for some reason. There's a couple of spots we can jump up and down to move the GLM position up and over. However, the issue is we can't warp to any of the grassy parts of the walls, and the rocky walls were either too low down or too far away. I did manage to grab the wall here. This didn't help at all, but it's cool that you can do it. It took a long time, full of trial and error, but we started to see a plan forming. Whilst we were messing with the GLM movement, mostly with no success, I finally got a GLM warp, ever so slightly further along the rock wall. As worthless as this looks, this is actually a huge revelation. This means that our grab location has been updated to this position, and now we can jump back onto the land and continue to move our grab location a little bit further in the same direction. Each time we walk back to the wall, we can jump back, and then we just need to keep repeating this process as many times as we can to get closer and closer. There was one issue with this, however. Eventually we would get to a point where we would warp just far enough that we couldn't jump back on the land without grabbing the edge. And we absolutely do not want Rayman to grab this edge again, as this will reset our grab location back to the beginning. So basically this is as far forward as we can warp without being too far away from our starting ledge. And even then we're still not close enough to make the big diagonal movement jump to the bridge below. But having our grab location being this far out has another advantage. If we jump back to the starting ledge, and then from here we can look at raising our grab location upwards. Now that our grab location starting point is as far out as it is, there was a chance that we'd be able to hit the rocky wall just beyond the grass wall. Several hours of trial and error later, and I pulled off this GLM warp. Yeah, I can't believe it either. It turns out this level's walls don't quite match the shape of the walls we actually see, but the actual walls are more vertical, and it was only by inching our grab location slowly forwards that we were able to maneuver up to this very spot. This was the highest we've managed to warp to so far, so this jump needs to make it. You guys have no idea how many days I have spent on this section. The amount of times I've nearly given up, and I finally pull this off. I'm going for the jump. Tense. Let's do it. Oh my god! Yes! Oh! It's done. The run's over. Thank you for watching. See ya. I'm done. Bye. After literal days of being stuck here, I could not believe we got past that hoverless. And we're only at the beginning of the level and I'm already tired of it. Thankfully, we can progress without much issue by swinging, platforming, hanging from webs and riding a giant plum. No hovering required. Later in the level, there's a forking path. If we go left, it leads us to a cave with some more platforming, but the obstacle is this downward flowing lava. This is too far to jump without hovering, mostly due to Rayman hitting the low ceiling. We can stand on this torch without taking damage though. It didn't help, despite our best efforts. We tried some GLM shenanigans, but none of the walls seemed to be the right shape and not grabbable. So unfortunately, this part looks impossible without at least one hover. Thankfully though, this whole cave is completely optional and we can just skip it by taking the right path at the fork earlier. We take a lengthy plum ride until we arrive at these large platforms spread apart. Hovering was definitely intended here, but with no low ceilings to get in our way, we can actually use diagonal jumps and just about make every single one of these jumps. Some of them are by the very skin of our teeth, but considering I was dreading this part, I'm very relieved to get through this still hoverless. The rest of the level is fairly simple, with sliding and swinging on this moving statue's head, and then we have our second mask. The next stop is the Precipice. And speaking of dreading certain parts, this was easily the level I was looking forward to the least. The start is a quick dash across bridges while each part of the bridge gets destroyed. But as we progress, we come to a ginormous gorge. The very intention of this section is to make a long hover whilst firing at flying homing bombs before they hit you. And it's quite a long hover to make it to the other side. I was planning to test some GLM warps here and see what we can accomplish. However, if we look at this level on our map viewer, we can quickly see that this won't be possible. You see, only the light green surfaces can be grabbed onto in order to update our grab location, and this entire gorge has no green at all. In fact, the only light green surface in this whole section is the very starting platform, which is way too far back. There isn't even any way of moving our grab location with this platform either. Regrettably, this means we must perform our first hover of the run, but we want to make sure to clear this gorge in a single hover in the interest of performing as few hovers as possible. The problems are these bombs that float towards you. If they hit us, they will interrupt our hover. We can quickly hover again whilst falling, but that would count as another hover, so we had to make sure to avoid these bombs. We did get hit by a bomb towards the end, but we were close enough to the bridge to not need to hover again. The last part of the precipice is full of barrel flying and boss fight, so no more hovers needed. Next, we're off to the pirate mines. The very start has a little platforming section that's not too difficult, especially with the diagonal jumps. The whole level after this though is completely free since it's centered around flying a ship to rescue Glowbox's kids. So we can go to the echoing caves next. The start is all about speed before our platforms sink. Some parts of this could have been made easy with the hover here and there, but it's still possible without it. There was a fairly big jump we needed at the end though, and I completely misjudged it the first time, which was embarrassing since the second time was actually very easy. After this, we need to find 4 switches in the area before we can move on, but finding them involves a maze-like level design rather than any real platforming, so no real difficulty here. With the exception of these propeller platforms, a good old diagonal jump is needed here, and we rescue another teensy. Now to the pirate factory, and this level is just enemy ambushes and a really annoying boss fight, so it's basically free for a no hover run. However, once we get beneath the lava sanctuary, this changes drastically. We had to wrestle the camera as we attempt the most difficult diagonal jump so far. Getting down to these logs below would prove to be very difficult. They're much too far, and even our best diagonal jumps and the bad camera angles don't help. We did manage to land on this floating ledge that looks like a turtle shell, but that just strands us here. Many fails later, and I remembered that we used a purple lum to swing our way to this platform. flashback to the strategy we used in the Cave of Bad Dreams using a purple lum. Time to see if it works here too. Well, it gets us very close. The rebound and momentum that we get from bumping into the wall as we swing never seemed consistent, so it took a lot of practice to find the best position and timing, but after a lot of failed attempts, we finally nailed it. Some more big jumps later and a boss fight, and we arrive at the Lava Sanctuary entrance. Now we need to ride a purple flower through the lava tunnel, until these flames melt the flower. We would normally just jump and hover to the bridge in front of us, and whereas the bridge doesn't seem too far away, the issue is Rayman is locked to the centre of this flower, so we can't get a run up on the jump. What's more, the camera is locked into position here, which really hinders our diagonal jump. For the longest time I was attempting to use the diagonal jump to make it to the right side of the bridge, since that's the lowest part, and I was hoping we could get just close enough to grab on the edge, but no matter how many times I tried, we cannot make this jump. Considering what the solution actually was here, I felt really dumb for being stuck as long as I was. So by using the diagonal jump in one direction, and then switching to another diagonal direction in mid-air, in order to maintain forward momentum, and to get as close to the green lum as possible, we can just get close enough that we still fall to our death, but we collect the green lum just as we die. And since the green lums are the game's checkpoints, we respawn on the very ledge we've been trying to land on. We continue to make our way through some tricky platforming, but it's all possible without hovering. But once we meet Lee in the Lava Sanctuary, she gives us the power of flight, which is required for the rest of this level until we get to the boss fight at the end. There really is no way around this. We have to travel quite far through these caves, with insta-kill walls and floors. Since this isn't strictly hovering, it's a temporary flight power-up that's forced upon us, I think we can allow it. You're free to let me know if you disagree in the comments, but I'm still considering this a one hover run so far. Anyway, we arrive at the boss fight, lose our power of flight, and then we beat the boss with ease. That's Mask 3 down. Now we need to rescue Clark by travelling through the Skull Cave under Glowbox's house. But there's a problem. There's a big lava pit blocking our way. The game intends us to use Rayman's new flying power-up, which only works here for some reason. But unlike the previous level, the flight power is not forced upon us this time as a whole level-based mechanic, so it didn't feel right to use it to clear this gap. I like to think that Rayman can only use the flight power when the level itself is completely built around using it, and not just to avoid one single lava pit in a hub area. I attempted some nonsense with GLM warps, but the issue is there are too many walls between Rayman and the grab location. If there are any walls in the way, then they prevent Rayman from warping to where we want to go. We're gonna need another way across this pit, and it just so happens there is yet another trick in this game. And it might be the weirdest one yet. The Rayman Speedrun community calls this the PMS, or the playable menu state. I'd love to know how someone figured this one out. First of all, this bug only works in the game's hub areas, and none of the actual levels themselves. The first thing we need to do is completely fill up our PlayStation 2 memory card with save data. I'm not kidding, that is an important part of the setup. This game prompts you to save as you travel through a loading screen, so if we just duplicate our save file over and over and over until the memory card is full, this means saving the game over 30 times by the way. Once the memory card is full, you travel back to the hub area and the save prompt shows up again. When we choose yes, we get a message telling us that our memory card is full. We then choose no, and then we hold the select button whilst we press X, and then we press the start button. You now may notice that the save menu is still on screen during gameplay. It's a bit subtle, but it's there. This is playable menu state, and it's definitely a bug. Even though it doesn't look like it, we can still navigate the menu whilst we're moving Rayman, and pressing X will make a selection as well as making Rayman jump. So if we make our way back to the lava pit like this, and then try to select yes to save the game, as soon as we attempt to overwrite an existing game file, the game completely loses it, and it immediately zips Rayman straight up as far as it can until you either hit a roof or the highest boundary of the game. If we were outside doing this and not inside a cave, we would have been propelled miles into the sky. So by combining this trick with some diagonal movement right as it happens, we can make it over this lava pit with one crazy leap of faith. The only reason this PMS glitch even works in the first place is that if you hold the select button anywhere in the game's hub areas, some helpful text displays on the screen. Since we can get this text to display during a failed save attempt caused by a full memory card, we can completely bug bug the game to achieve this insane skyward warp. It's just a shame this only works in hub areas, but then again, if it could be used anywhere, then this whole run would just abuse them. In any case, we can use this to get to the Skull Cave. And whereas this level has its fair share of platforming, it's all very doable without hovering. The hardest part about this level is not being able to use the hover to save ourselves when bats knock us off the web. We rescue Clark, we fight Clark, and then he comes to his senses. We've beaten the level. Clark opens up the Iron Mountains for us, and this level is easily where I spent the longest time during this entire run. The Iron Mountains may as well be the final level of the game, since the last couple of levels after this don't really need any hovering at all. The level starts off easy enough. You can make this swing just fine. And you can just about make it over to these platforms with a precise diagonal jump. You can even make this jump here too. But that's when we come to the waterfall. Words can't explain what we went through to try and get down here hoverless. We would normally hover from rock to rock to get to the bottom, but just by looking, it goes without saying you can't even make the first jump. So it's time to experiment with some good old GLM warps. But even though a lot of surfaces on this map are light green, their very platform at the start of the waterfall is not. This means we can't force our grab location anywhere near the waterfall, so our hopes of warping to the surrounding walls were dashed. It simply isn't possible to get down this waterfall without hovering. But how many hovers does it take? Well, using a big diagonal jump, we can get a good amount of momentum right away. This allows us to hover all the way to the third rock. We can get across the next 3 rocks with some very precise diagonal jumps. This leaves the final gap between the last rock and the hot air balloon, and this is far too large to jump without another hover. So this waterfall added 2 more hovers to the run, putting us on a total of 3 hovers in the whole run. And that's just not good enough. I didn't care what it took, I was determined to shave off at the very least 1 more hover. I was discussing strategies with some of the members of Rayman Speedrun Discord server, and the idea of performing a swim in air glitch came up. A swim in air glitch does exactly what the name says. It allows you to swim through the air, as if the entire level was underwater. The way the glitch is performed is by landing in a body of water whilst out of bounds, as long as that water doesn't have any floor directly beneath it. However, there's only one part of this whole map with any water, and it's the shallow water inside this pipe near the start of the whole area. The theory was, if we can get out of bounds near this pipe, we can land just at the very edge of the pipe and just touch the water with Rayman's hitbox without being pulled back in bounds. This will then allow us to swim through the air in any direction we like, but we get the bad with the good on this. We have an air meter, as if we were actually underwater, so we won't be able to get too far until we drown. But maybe we could just make it to the loading trigger under the hot air balloon before we drown. First things first though, we need to get out of bounds near the pipe. GLM warps were the best way to achieve this, but there were no grabbable ledges nearby, so we couldn't get our grab location to move here. But then the members of the Discord server came to the rescue once more. They informed me that Rayman's grab location will actually update if we hang on any ledge and then land in shallow water. I have no idea why that works, it just does. And that's all that matters. Now, all we needed was an uneven surface to jump on over and over in order to move Rayman's grab location upwards and into the wall above the pipe, so we can warp there. However, we had to progress through the level to find an uneven surface, and that gives us another issue. There has to be a direct line of sight between the uneven surface that we jump on and the warp location, otherwise Rayman just bumps into the wall mid-warp. After examining the Rayman map tool, thank you to Robin once more for setting this up for me, by the way, I noticed that there was no such uneven surfaces close to the pipe. The majority of the uneven surfaces were in the big grassy area later in the level, but then I noticed something else. If I angled the camera from this big grassy area and pointed it in the direction of the pipe that we were trying to warp to, the walls in between these 2 areas weren't solid. Using this map tool, we can see straight through the walls. This means that if we can get to the grassy area after we land in the water, we can warp from there. And with a lot of patience, we finally found the right spot to jump. And then finally, we get warped here. we're above the pipe hanging from the wall over the pipe entrance. And with some practice, this is the perfect spot to jump and just touch the edge of the water and activate the swim in air glitch. Now we need to swim as fast as we can towards the hot air balloon using diagonal movement, which still works while swimming, and then hope that we make it to the platform below the balloon. However, no matter how many times we tried this, no matter how close we were able to get, just couldn't make it before drowning. There is an added tactic of using Rayman's attack right as he hits the water, which allows us to reach maximum swim speed quicker, but even that wasn't enough. Robin and I practiced this swim so many times and it just wasn't working. In the end, we were forced to come up with something else. Using the same GLM warp tactic, we were able to warp even higher up the same wall as before. This wall stretches up so high that we were able to use a single hover from here all the way to the hot air balloon. Pessimist in me was disappointed that we still had to use a hover, but on the positive side, this did mean that we were able to shave off one more hover from the run. So this now actually puts us on 2 hovers overall. As I mentioned, the rest of the game is quite easy hoverless since it's all missile riding, force flying, slope sliding, and the final boss fight. Sorry to wrap up the ending so suddenly, but it really was just all those things I listed. That brings us to the end of the game and the end of the video. Now, please, if anyone out there thinks they can beat Rayman 2 Revolution in less than 2 hovers, then please do so, and then let me know how you did it. Still though, the entire game in just 2 hovers is quite impressive, all things considered, so I'm happy with that result. Now, don't forget to like this video. I assume you must have liked it since you made it this far, and please do subscribe for more videos like this one. Or better yet, share the video with somebody who you think might enjoy it. And if you want to be extra cool, you could follow our Twitch channel. It'll be linked in the description, thank you. I'm actually thinking of maybe streaming some of the challenges on Twitch before I edit them down into these videos. We'll see. Whew. End card number 2, right. I only get 20 seconds on these, so I'll try and be quick. I did not expect this hoverless playthrough to take as long as it did. I thought this run was dead as soon as I got to the tornado section. So a big massive thank you to all the Rayman 2 speedrunners who helped me out with this. Since this is only the 2nd video on the channel, there'll only be one other video I can link to here. It's a Croc Legend of the Gobbos video. If you've not already watched it, I highly recommend it. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!